and welcome to ARTFul Insights. I'm Shane Farrell, the Digital Projects and Programs Manager for ARTZ Philadelphia, and together you and I are going to look at some art today. This video is produced in partnership between Dementia Society of America and ARTZ Philadelphia. Each month we offer a live program where a small group of people talk about a work of art or works of art from museums and cultural centers around the country. It's a different museum or cultural center each month, and in addition to that live program, we also produce a video like the one you're watching right now. We look at the same works of art as we did in the live group, but with the video it's 30 to 40 minutes in length. You can watch it anytime, day or night, that might suit you. And it's an opportunity to have a more intimate, self-driven conversation about the art. I'll ask a few questions to get us started, give you a few things to think about. I'll share some of the observations and thoughts that folks from the live group brought up that I think might be interesting for you to consider. But really, this video each month is about you. It's about what you see in these works of art, how you respond to them, and just having the opportunity to look at a work of art and think about it at your own pace. If you're watching this video with someone, please feel free to pause from time to time if you'd like, so that you can have your own conversation. If you're watching on your own, we're delighted to have you, and it'll be a conversation just between the two of us. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the museum or cultural center that we're visiting today. Welcome to ARTFul Insights. So, here we are at the museum we're going to be visiting today. Today we're traveling to Buffalo, New York, and we are visiting the Buffalo AKG Museum. This picture might look a little familiar to you because we have been here once before, and at the time we last visited this museum, it was called the Albright-Knox Gallery. And the reason the museum has a new name is they're just about to finish a big expansion. The building you see here on the left is a new building. It's set to open in May 2023, so very soon. It's called the Jeffrey E. Gundlach Building, and it will add about 30,000 square feet to the museum's exhibition space. So a really big shift for the museum and a new name to go along with it. The Buffalo AKG is one of the oldest art institutions in the country. The museum started as the Buffalo Fine Arts Academy in 1862, and it worked out of a series of temporary locations until it established its permanent location in 1905. Its collections focus primarily on modern and contemporary art. The collection includes works from many different art movements throughout the museum's history, from the 1800s until current day. The museum breaks up its mission into 5 goals, which are as follows. 1, to present exhibitions, performances, and programs that challenge and inspire. 2, to seek tomorrow's masterpieces while developing our world-renowned collection of modern and contemporary art. 3, to create education programs for lifelong learning and discovery. 4, to engage and empower widening, inclusive audiences. And 5, to inspire open dialogue and common understanding. So now that you know a little bit about the museum, why don't we go ahead and take a look at our artwork for today? So here we are looking at the work of art that we're going to be discussing today. And before I say anything about it, I just want to give you a chance to look it over, see what you see, let your eye take you wherever it may, and just notice different details about it. whatever draws your attention. Anything in this painting that you find interesting, or anything in this painting that you find unusual or frustrating. Any thoughts you have about this painting are welcome. So just take a few minutes, look the piece over, and when we come back, we'll have a discussion about it. So now that you've had a couple of minutes to look over this painting, let's take a closer look at it together and ask some questions about it. One of the things we always like to talk about when we look at different works of art is the color and what's going on with the sense of color in a painting. Was there anything you noticed when you took a few minutes to look this over about the color? Is there any color in this painting that's particularly drawing you in? Why don't we take a look at some of the different colors we see here and how the artist has created these colors. Up here in the area where the sky is, we see mostly white and blue tones, it looks like. Just below that, if we look at this piece of the landscape, we see maybe some browns and oranges over here. We see some green and yellow tones across the middle, dotting the tops of these hills on the edge of the landscape. We see some darker colors, maybe some purples or dark blues. And then if we move down to this section of the landscape toward the bottom, we see a mix of things, but the overall impression is kind of a brownish or purplish color, kind of perhaps a dark soil color. Maybe the artist is depicting the soil here. So we have all these different areas of color when we look at this piece from afar. Were there any colors in this piece that caught your eye, that drew your attention in particular? I'd be curious to hear what colors you noticed first. And why don't we take a bit of a closer look at some of the color here to see how it changes when we look a little closer at the painting. So right now it's kind of as if we're sitting off at a distance from the painting, but if we were to walk right up in front of it, what would we see? Why don't we zoom in on this area over here and take a look at what we see when we look a little closer. So now that we look a little bit closer at this area, we can notice it's made up of all different colors. There's kind of the whole rainbow represented here. We can see dots of yellow, green, blue, some orange, some red. There's just about every color under the sun. So that's really interesting, isn't it? That this painting changes so much when we look closer at it. Do you feel a difference looking at this painting close as opposed to looking at it from far away? Does it make you feel differently to look at it up close? Or does it make you notice something you might not have noticed before? We can see that the surface of the painting, what it appears to be from far away, becomes a bit more chaotic perhaps when we look at it more closely. If I had started the discussion just by looking at this part of the painting this close, do you think you would know what the artist was trying to show us? Or even what color they were trying to create? What do you think you would say about the painting if this was the way you saw it first? And it's very interesting to see how artworks can really transform when we are able to look at them in different ways like that. Have you ever seen a painting like this before where from far away it was very clear what it was, but the closer you got to it, the more detail you notice, the more it didn't necessarily look like one specific thing or the other, but like a crazy field of color? So why don't we go back to looking at it from a little bit further away, and now that we've seen it up close, maybe we'll start to notice some new things. Maybe it will change our perception of the painting a little bit. So now that we've taken a close look at things, let's zoom out a bit and maybe ask some more overarching questions about this scene. Where do you think this scene might be? Is there a specific place you've ever been to that this reminds you of? Or maybe if you look out your window right now, you might see something like this, depending on where you are. Where do we think this scene might be taking place, and what are some of the clues that give us that impression? One of our participants said, "I think it's a wonderful scene in a hilly farm area, and it could be close to where we are in Pennsylvania." And it's true, in Pennsylvania, there's lots of farmland. If you go to certain areas of the state, you'll see rolling hills and farmland just about everywhere. But there are lots of places across the world with rolling hills and farmland. Where do you think this might be? And when we look at where this might be or what type of place this might be, do we notice other details about the environment? So someone in our group, as I said, mentioned that it might be farmland. So maybe that makes us ask certain questions about this environment. What does it mean that we're looking at farmland? What are the people in the scene doing that relates to that? And how are the people depicted in contrast to the land? Right? So we have a few different elements going on here. We have a landscape, and then we also have people in the landscape. So what is the relationship of the people to the landscape? What do you think about that? What is their relationship to this landscape? Someone in the live group mentioned that they really enjoyed that the sky took up almost half of the painting, because you need sunlight and rain and air, of course, to grow crops. So they thought it was interesting that the artist chose to make the sky really large. Are there other details like that that you notice of what's shown larger, what's shown smaller? Is there anything that you think the artist is trying to draw your attention to? Well, someone in our live group said the people are really small compared to the nature around them. And they are a bit small. There's kind of a big landscape, and the people are just smaller things within it. This person suggested that maybe the artist was trying to tell us that nature is a bigger force than man, and that the people we see here are just kind of servants to nature. And that's a really interesting idea. Maybe by showing the land really big and the people kind of small, the artist is saying something about the relationship between people and nature. What do you think? Does this make you think of anything about your relationship to nature or any type of person's relationship to nature? And that asks another more direct question, which is, what are these people doing out here in nature? What do we think they're up to? What do you think? What do you think these people are up to? Why don't we look at a few things about them and we can see what that can tell us. So let's start. Let's just go from left to right and we can look at each different figure. So here we see this figure, and it looks like they're maybe holding some kind of basket. Do you think the basket is full or empty? We couldn't really decide in our online program on Zoom. We weren't sure if the basket was full of something or if it was about to be filled with something. We can see that the dress or skirt on this figure is kind of bustled up in the back. If you look in the back here, it's kind of bunched together and lifted. So maybe for some reason this figure is trying to kind of keep it out of their way, trying to keep their feet free so they can move around. Then if we look up to their head, we see that perhaps there's something wrapped around their shoulders and their head there. What do you think they would be wearing something like this for? Perhaps it's to protect them from the sun. It could be to stay warm. What do you think they might be wearing that for? And then if we look at how the figure's face is positioned, where does it seem like they're looking to you? What does it seem like their attention is focused on? Well, to me, it kind of looks like they're looking down in this direction at what this figure is doing. What do you think? Do you think that's where they're looking? Do you think maybe they're looking over in the distance, over here somewhere? And what kind of attention do you think they're paying to whatever they're looking at? Are they very focused? Or are they just sort of relaxed and casual? What do you think? Well, why don't we take a look at this figure now and see what we think they might be doing. So when we look toward the ground here, we notice that this figure is pushing some sort of implement into the ground. So perhaps they're digging. What do you think they might be doing here? Do you think they're digging in the soil, or do you think they're doing something else? And if we look up at their clothing again, it looks like they've got on something on their feet. What do those look like to you? Do they look like work boots, or perhaps a simpler kind of shoe? We see that their shirt seems to be a little bit baggy on them. And on top, again, we have something covering their head. And it looks like it might be a hat with kind of a wider brim coming out of it. So maybe this is also for protection from the sun. What do you think this person's clothes indicate about them? Are they a specific type of person? Does it say anything about their role in society? And again, when we look at their face, where does it seem like they're looking? Does it seem like they're looking down at what they're doing and they're focused intently on the task? Or are they looking elsewhere? So now that we've looked at these two people individually, what do we notice about the two of them together? Is there anything going on between the two of them? Do we think they're involved in both helping with the same sort of task? And what do we think that task is? What do you think these people might be up to? Well, some of the people in our group discussion on Zoom said the man could be digging crops out, so he could be harvesting crops, right? He could be growing something on this farmland, and he could be reaping the product of their harvest. Someone said he could be doing kind of the opposite. He could be planting something new. So he could be digging a hole, and they could be putting in seeds or bulbs or something like that, and they could be growing new crops. What do you think they're doing? What kind of work is this? Are they harvesting? Are they planting something? Or is it something else entirely that's going on? And if they are planting or harvesting something, what do we think it might be? Someone suggested they thought it might be a root vegetable of some sort, maybe potatoes. What do you think? What kind of crop do you think they would be growing in this area? And this kind of leads us to another question. So perhaps these people are doing some sort of work together, and they're each helping the other with the task at hand. So what do we think their relationship is to each other? What do you think? Are they just two workers who are out together in a field? Or is something else going on? Well, if we keep looking across the painting and we focus over here, we can see there's a smaller figure there. What do we think this figure is doing? It looks like maybe they're sitting or kneeling on the ground. When we look at all three of them together, what do they look like? Well, a lot of people in our group discussion on Zoom seem to think that maybe this was a family. So you have the two adults, the mother and the father, perhaps, doing work on one side, and then you have the child a bit off in the distance, kind of just sitting and watching, or maybe they're helping out too. What do you think? Do you agree that this looks like a family? Or do you think their relationship might be something else entirely? And actually, when we look into the distance, there's perhaps another figure in this painting. Right here. Who do we think this person is? What are they doing? Or do we even agree that that's a person? It's kind of hard to see. Let's zoom in a little bit and see what we notice. So when we really zoom in close to this area of the painting, what do we think that that is? Or maybe it's easier to see it from far away. Earlier we zoomed in really close to the painting, and it kind of made it more difficult to tell what we were looking at. What do you think? Is it easier to see what's going on here from close or from far away? And what do we think is happening here? Well, a lot of our participants in the group discussion seem to think that this was a person riding in on a horse and carriage. And that kind of makes sense. We look at the shadow, it's really tall. We see something in the center here that could maybe be a horse. We see these two things on the edge here. Maybe those are the wheels of the carriage. Maybe this in the center is the carriage. And then up here, we see what could be a person. So here we are, zoom back out. And when you look at that area of the painting, what do you see? Do you agree that that might be a person on a horse and carriage? One of our participants said, well, I hope it is a person on a horse and carriage, and I hope they're coming to help these other people because they're working on the land without any animals or machines to help them. It's just them with a shovel and a basket, and they don't even have horses to help them till the land. And that's very interesting. Maybe that tells us something about the scene here. What do you think that might tell us, that these people are doing hard labor on farmland, or what looks like it's probably hard labor, and they don't have animals helping them. They have very simple kind of implements and tools, and they're just walking through doing this piece by piece. What does that tell us about these people? Well, we've talked about the people here a lot, so let's zoom out again and ask a different question that might answer some of the questions we've asked before, which is, how does this painting make us feel? What do we feel when we look at this? What's your natural reaction to this? How does it make you feel? Well, a lot of our participants in our group discussion seem to say that it made them feel very peaceful. Do you agree with that? Does the painting feel peaceful to you? And how does that change when we zoom in and out of the painting? When we zoomed into the soil before, and let's do it again right now, would you say that this part of the painting feels peaceful when we're really close up to it like this? How does looking at it really close like this make you feel? To me, it's a bit more energetic or even chaotic, perhaps. And yet, when we zoom out, the main word we were hearing was peaceful. So that's an interesting contrast, too. When we look at the painting from far away, it maybe gives us a sense of peace, of calm. But when we look at it really up close, we see these small marks everywhere. There's a lot going on, and it's a lot to absorb. So it's interesting how one painting can contain what might seem like conflicting moods and conflicting emotions when we look at it far away versus looking at it up close. Have you ever seen an artwork like that before, where when you looked at it one way, it made you feel a certain emotion, and when you looked at it a different way, it made you feel an entirely different emotion than the first one? I'm going to share one more thing from our group discussion that came up about how this painting makes us feel, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. A number of people, in addition to saying that the painting made them feel peaceful, said that they felt a sense of patience in the painting. They felt like the work being done was happening very slowly, and that there is this sense of slow-moving time in this painting. And that's really interesting, because we're only really seeing one moment. And yet, everyone felt like there was a lot of slow time being represented. How can an artist do that? How is that possible, that just seeing one scene makes us feel the passage of time? What do you think? Do you agree with that? And if you do agree with that, how does the artist do that? How does the artist create that sense? And what would a painting look like if it was meant to show something very fast? How would you show the opposite of that? What do you think? How could you show a slow painting and a fast painting? We've talked about so much in this painting, and I feel like we could talk even longer. There's just a lot to talk about. And it's interesting to see just how much paintings can contain, and just how much of a conversation you and I can have about them. We can talk about time, we can talk about the work that the people in the painting are doing, we can talk about the relationship of human beings and nature, we can talk about the family. There's so many things that came up in our discussion of just this one painting. So perhaps there is a way to contain a lot of time in just one painting, because you and I have just spent a good bit of time talking about it together. And I'm really happy that you joined me for this discussion. So before we go, I just want to give you some basic information about the painting. Painting is called Paysans dans le champs Éragny. I apologize if my French pronunciation is not so great, but that means peasants in the fields, Éragny. Éragny is a town in northwestern France. The artist's name is Camille Pissarro, And this painting was painted in 1890. It's oil on canvas, and it's about 25.5 by 31.5 inches. So now that you know a little bit about the painting, maybe you have some final thoughts or ideas about it. I want to thank the Buffalo AKG Museum for having us back once again to look at some great artwork from their collection. I want to especially thank Karen Duvall, who helped make this program happen both times. We really appreciate your help. And of course, I just want to thank you once again for spending this time with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you asked some interesting questions, noticed some interesting things, and I hope maybe sometime you will join us for one of our group discussions on Zoom. You can find upcoming ARTFul Insights events on our website at artsphilly.org. Click on events to see our events calendar. And I hope you'll explore some of the other ARTFul Insights videos as well, which you should be able to find in the same place you're watching this one right now. So thanks again for joining me. I'm Shane Farrell, and this has been another episode of ARTFul Insights.